Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll start us out slowly here so that we can continue to get a little oriented to all the things going on in this space. I'm Jillian Kinzie from Indiana University, Bloomington, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving on the Gardner Institute board. I've been serving for several years now, and I'm quite pleased to see all of the incredible work that you're undertaking. So it's always good to invite board members to meetings where things look really good for the organization, and you all are doing a fine job of demonstrating that there are quite a few concerted efforts going on to improve the quality of undergraduate education. So I want to thank you for providing me a great picture of the success of these initiatives. So thank you for that. My role here today is to try and facilitate this multi-mode, multi-site presentation, and to try and work with you to ensure that you're getting what you came out of this session, and to assure that our presenters, who you will see now lined up, our three presenters here, in this case Beverly, Catherine, and Emily, they'll introduce themselves in a moment, have a chance to share their good work. Just so you all know, this is being recorded for viewing later. It's being live streamed, and we have obviously this live presentation going on, and people from California are participating in the webinar version. And we have multiple cameras in the room, some capturing images for the recorded session, others only focusing on the live stream. So all that to say that at some point, at least the best part of your profile will be shown in some image somewhere. So know that that's possible. So thank you for being with us here, and I want to thank our presenters in advance. And at this point, I'm going to let our presenters take over and ask Rob to make sure that their voice can be heard in the room, and let them introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Senior Director for the Center for Effective Teaching and Learning at Cal State LA.
I am Beverly Bondad-Brown, the Director of Academic Technology here at Cal State LA.
And I am Emily Daniell Magruder. I direct the Institute for Teaching and Learning and the California State University Office of the Chancellor. And I have the pleasure of beginning today, so we'll start with our slides.
Can everyone see the slides at this point?
Not yet. We have our master media man in the back.
Okay.
Give it 1 second. All right, we did test all this. You know we did, right? We are in Houston.
About
so.
that. Here, let's see.
Aha.
There you go.
Yay.
All right, shall I start here, Beverly? All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Our presentation focuses on scaling professional development to affect institutional outcomes related to student success. And we're going to focus today on the work of one Center for Teaching and Learning within the California State University system. So I want to provide some perspective on faculty development within such a large system. The CSU Institute for Teaching and Learning, represented by the larger red structure on this slide, is housed in our system-wide office. And what the Institute does is support work done on local campuses by campus centers, represented by the smaller green structures or houses there. We know that an important driver of change is people interacting with peers over time, and sometimes crucial funding for professional development is provided by the system office. So the larger context in which the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Cal State LA has been working and has been thinking about scale is our graduation initiative. So that would be the next, there we go, there's the next slide. So the CSU is the largest public four-year system in the country. Currently, we enroll 485,000 students. That's almost 500,000 students across 23 campuses. And we have a single chancellor and a board of trustees that set policies for the system. Within that, the campuses have a fair amount of autonomy in implementing those policies. And increasing graduation rates has been a high priority for some time, but just over a year ago now, a year and a half ago, it became an even higher priority. In early fall of 2016, our chancellor announced a new phase of our system-wide graduation initiative, this time putting a target year for achievement of 2025 onto the name of the initiative and setting some ambitious goals, which are represented here on the slide. So just to highlight a couple, our goal is to increase our four-year graduation rate of first-time, full-time, first-year students from 19% to 40%. So we aim to double that rate by 2025, and we have a parallel goal for the six-year graduation rate for our first-time, full-time, first-year students, and goals for transfer students as well. Now, represented on the slide here are system-wide goals. Each campus has its own targets, and there's a significant amount of variation. But overall, we're aiming to enable our students to graduate sooner while we deepen learning at the same time. So the next slide, we'll go back to our picture of our big house and small house of professional development. If goal setting is the first step in achieving tangible results, the next step, of course, is to make plans to achieve those goals. When the goals were announced in 2016, 2025 was 9 years away. That was almost a decade away. But when you get down to concrete planning, we realized that fall 2019, the year when the six-year cohort against whence the graduation rates would be, the six-year rates would be measured, was only 3 years away. And currently it's 18 months away. So one thing that we knew is that to achieve goals this ambitious, we would not be able to continue doing business in the same way. So the role of a system-wide teaching and learning institute is first to communicate system-wide priorities to directors of campus teaching and learning and faculty development centers so that they can align their work to contribute to the goals, and on the other hand, to communicate back to leadership at all levels how faculty professional development can increase graduation rates and eliminate equity gaps. A belief widely held by faculty developers, I hope there's some faculty developers in our room today, is that our work leads to student success. Yet we haven't often enough, we're beginning to do so, but we need to do it more, of pulling the thread all the way through to show the connection between our work and improved student learning outcomes. So this leads to a key question that we want to think about today. And we're going to have some help from Jillian on this reflection. We invite you to reflect with us here as we begin on how faculty professional development can contribute toward increasing graduation rates and eliminating equity gaps. We want to think about what faculty developers need to do or do differently to have demonstrable impact on student success initiatives. So Jillian, I'm going to let you help facilitate this reflection.
Thank you, Emily. So this is our appointed reflection time. So if you would, please, take a moment to think about your response to this. And what I'd love to have you do is, at least to one person at your table, this is the importance of sitting near someone else at this point, offer your reflection to the person sitting next to you. And then we'd like to collect just a couple of the ideas to give our presenters some sense of the climate and what the sense is in the room for this role. So reflect and then share it with one other person, please. And we'll just take a couple minutes here. All right, I know there's never enough time for good reflection, so I'm going to interrupt your reflection and your sharing of good ideas and ask if there are some notions, maybe something you heard from someone that you think we want to share with the whole group. So I'd love to get just a couple of comments, something that you either said to your partner or that you heard from your partner that suggests some ways that faculty development can contribute to these important goals. Don't make me choose you. I would love to have a volunteer. Oh, thank you very much. And I will have you speak in the microphone.
Oh, yeah, of course. So my colleague here at the table described it as having faculty think about, or having us think about standards of care. So thinking about teaching and learning in terms of the medical metaphor of caring for our students.
Does that mean we also have mortality and morbidity? All right, that wonderful suggestion went south quickly to all of a sudden get into morbidity. But yeah, so some standards of care. Nice, okay. Someone else, yes.
Okay, at our table, our colleague here, Sherry, had talked about the importance of sort of diversity training, but not from the classical sense, but more from perhaps being able to challenge belief systems to understand what it really means to look at diversity and equity.
My comment came from a conversation I had with a colleague, but traditionally we look at diversity training as a form of compliance, but the suggestion was more of, it came from a desire from my colleague to want to be able to eliminate that misconception between her and her students that there's some kind of barrier. So she was interested in training that would help her understand some of the cultural issues that relate. This colleague is Hispanic, but trying to interact with African American students or even students who are from just our local community, she perceived that sometimes there's this perception from the students that she doesn't want to help when she really does. And so I had never thought about it from that perspective, that diversity training is something that faculty really need, not in terms of, oh, there's some type of racial disparity, as much as just understanding, I guess, more cultural competence in a way.
Yeah. Great. One more suggestion or one more idea. Yes. Thank you.
So Sheila, who is sitting next to me here, commented on faculty development's role in building community among faculty and establishing our shared responsibility for addressing equity gaps.
Thank you. All right. So as you can see, Catherine and Emily and Beverly, we've got a lot of views in the room that might support your beliefs. So why don't you continue sharing some of the other lessons learned from your work?
Great. So that is a very elegant segue. I really appreciated those comments. I like that standards of care. Let me give you a little bit of background about our campus, because we're sort of ground zero for a very diverse multilingual student population. We are at HSI. We are located in East Los Angeles. We have been first gen for a long time, and we are largely and classically Latinx. We're also ranked first in the country for the upward mobility of our students. That was the Chetty et al. Study that came out in the New York Times. And as you can imagine, with such a fluid and large population, we have to really think about what, if you will, that standard of care looks like when we're thinking about designing faculty development programming. Our centers are small and traditionally various in the levels and kinds of service they offer. So for instance, our Director of Academic Technology is in the same unit as CETL, and our technology services for faculty are co-located. So not all centers operate like that. Moreover, funding is a perennial issue, and the results that we saw initially, we started up the center in 2011, fairly modest, and we want to talk about that. Beverly will talk about that in a minute. So something that has always captured her and my imagination was thinking about this idea of scale. In other words, could we offer programming to any faculty who wanted it? We have about 1,800 full-time tenure track and non-tenure track faculty with contingent appointments. In fact, 3 of 4 of faculty on this campus are faculty with contingent appointment.
So just kind of talking about our faculty development programming, you know, when we started back in 2011, we really started with a couple of really Moodle workshops, learning management system workshops, and we sort of scaled and really thought about scale from the beginning. So we started running kind of course redesign institutes where we had faculty for, you know, 3 or 4 days working through things. Some of them spilled out into the semester or the quarter at the time. And then really kind of as we kept developing programming, moved into other areas. So beyond just course redesign, we looked at online and hybrid institutes. We've been doing a lot in active learning. And then really thinking about how we could bundle this programming into, you know, things that people can have certificates for, and really where no programming was really a standalone piece, where faculty felt like bundling these things together kind of gave them, you know, a bigger portfolio of things. And all the way to now where we have certificates, we have, you know, a full hybrid course development program that runs through about 4 months of training. And we also are thinking about, you know, self-paced programming, faculty that can't spend all that time with us, you know, here on ground can do programming, and then we're developing now an inclusive pedagogy certificate. So you'll kind of see the evolution of where we kind of started a few years ago and just kept building and building and building. And so our programming has, you know, changed throughout this time.
So why did we do this? We did it because we started observing some interesting patterns of behavior with our faculty participants. There's a very good white paper done by 2 Harvard Business School profs called The Great Training Robbery. And you can just Google that and it'll come up pretty quickly. And in it, they argue that professional training, of which faculty development is and is not, but let's just say for the sake of the argument that there is a lot of training involved. Training doesn't really work. We see this with sexual harassment training. We all know how that turned out. We see it with things like, worker retraining. And they argue that unless you have a change in practice, it's just training. So one reason why we really thought about bundling is because we felt faculty actually wanted more, and they wanted something that was of a piece. So something that was more than just a one-shot, but was actually woven into something that was coherent for them. So with the Chancellor's office, there was a program called the Course Redesign with Technology Initiative that started up in 2013. And we started to think about, there was a lot of money for that program, and it's wrapping up this year. Emily, you can speak more to that as well. But one thing we found was that we had this array of incentives which to attract faculty and hopefully was appealing to their motivation. And all I'm going to do is just put these up on the screen now, and we'll talk about them later. But if you could just make a mental note of which of the following of these, whether it's a full course release, modest stipends, even more modest learning materials grants, community food, a high-touch iterative experience, or opportunities to practice, which of these do you think are most appealing to one's self-determination or motivation? And we'll move on. I've got a reflection question. So just hold that thought. We'll come back to it. So a second reflection question for the room is when any of us create professional development programming for faculty, what assumptions are we making about what works for faculty and then for students? And I'll turn it back over to Jillian.
Thank you. This idea of unpacking some assumptions right at the outset, I think, is a really interesting way to start this conversation. So again, I'm going to ask you to reflect for a moment here about some of the assumptions that you have about what's going to work. So think about this for a minute, and then we're going to try and solicit a few examples. So take a moment, assemble your thought, and then if you want to say it out loud to your partner again, do that. But we're only going to take about 2 minutes again just to get some ideas out on the table. And think about an audience. What seems to work for faculty or what seems to work for students?
how many people are here from back there. I'm like 80 to 100.
All right, folks. Let's surface some assumptions here. What are some of the assumptions that you have about what works in faculty development or professional development? Who's got an assumption? All right, so here we go.
I was going to say one thing that always bothers me about faculty training is that you're telling them to teach a certain way and the trainings are never like that. Like you're saying being engaging, do like active learning, and it's like, I know you're limited in time, but even if you did one thing that was more engaging, it would stick better than just talking at it. And I think we learn more by the trainers modeling what you're training us to do, right? So you're assuming it won't work on us, just like it wouldn't work on. It will work on us, but it won't work on the students when we're just like the students.
Thank you for stating that very important observation. Anybody else want to share one of their assumptions? Okay, we've got to go to the other corner here. All right, hold on. I can use the exercise.
So we often at my institution often make the assumption that faculty won't do anything unless anything new or out of the box or outside of their regular responsibilities if they're not compensated. But I meet faculty every day at my institution who are going above and beyond for no additional compensation, that the motivation is intrinsic. It's what they value or it's where they want to go next. So maybe we need to tap into those intrinsic motivations rather than assuming we just have to keep giving people money.
Right, does that resonate with anyone? Finding some intrinsic motivation? Anybody have an example of that? Oh, I'd love to.
On the intrinsic motivation, and it has to be, I think, part of the culture of the campus. So I was at a previous institution, and the intrinsic motivation was that they wanted everyone to do study abroad programs. And so this university, Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee, has one of the leading study abroad programs where they're doing over 35 study abroad programs a year. Well, it became part of the culture, and so everybody encouraged everybody to do it. They didn't give you any money, they didn't give you any release time, but they made a big deal about it. When the people came back from the trips for the fall, the president made a big to-do about it. Your name was mentioned in publications. You went on a road show and stuff like this. So it tapped into our desire to help our students because it was a requirement for all of the students to have a cross-cultural experience. Then we started focusing on doing cross-cultural experiences within our discipline. But like I said, they didn't give us any money, they didn't give us any release time, but it became part of the water that we were drinking there, and everybody was drinking the Kool-Aid.
Nice, very nice. I like the way this example actually touches on the idea of how is this professional development benefiting our students. So in this case, you've got an explicit objective that really is about changing and transforming your students' experience as well through study abroad. Nice. Yeah, anybody else have one? One last one to offer? Yeah.
I'm not a banker. I mean, I'm not an educator, I'm a banker. And I don't think there should be any hesitation about emphasizing the importance of financial incentive to these faculty persons.
All right, so this is an advocate for the financial incentives. All right, so it's coming from a banker perspective.
Again, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, I don't know. I think this is a good one for you guys to be able to respond to, is the comment that we shouldn't diminish or at least ignore the fact that there might be a financial incentive. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and he did qualify this by saying that he is a banker, not an educator. So, okay, all right. So, yeah. All right, so I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. That was terrific. So when we were, just kind of thinking about our programming and what type of programming and kind and how long and how often, we noticed that the framework for faculty development was often, I don't know about your respective campuses, but at least with some of the projects and grants we were working in, it was always centered on the course, the actual course structure, course design, course materials, and it really was course-centric. Whereas what we started just observing is that, next one, is that it actually was this other stuff. It was faculty behaviors that we saw again and again of being the gatekeeper for changes to course structure, changes to course materials. And just as with our students, I know you're probably all familiar with this, there's very large literature on things like grit and perseverance and socio-emotional factors, but even things like self-evaluation and determination and intrinsic motivation, self-awareness. We hypothesized that these actually had the most power over one's teaching practice, by extension, student success. So with that in mind, we moved away from the model we had. I'm going to show you some results first, and then we'll move back through it so you can see how we did what we do, but I want to give you the juicy stuff first. We decided to structure programming that focused on faculty teaching, just what they were doing, how they were doing it, and so-called behaviors that we wouldn't see in a workshop, but we would see if it was a year-long program. So I just want to show you, this is what the most recent iteration of our program looks like. This is a program that has increased, firstly, it involves scale. We have fewer, we used to have fewer faculty participating. Now, really for the same price, we have more faculty participating, which means many more students. And in this case, this is over a one-year period from 2016 to 17. We saw an increase of a half letter grade for students, for any faculty associated with that course that they were teaching. If the course was a low DFW or non-completion, what we mean by low DFW is the rates of Ds, Fs, or withdrawals were low, then we see this modest and persistent bump from around 3.0, 3.5 to 3.15. If the course was a high non-completion course, courses that had high rates of Ds, Fs, and withdrawals, then we see a much larger bump from 2.48 to 3.09. And this sort of held steady for across 2 semesters for the various programs. Interestingly, we sent out mid-course evaluations to students that were online, and these were voluntary. So of the 3,027 and that we're describing, we had about a 30% response rate, 1,083, a little better than that. We asked students what they were doing in the class. Were they listening to lectures? Were they doing a mix of active learning and lecture? Or were they doing something else? And 78.8% of them told us that they were doing a mix of lecture and active learning. This is following the course redesign. And this again held steady for the 2 programs we're talking about. There were a cohort of 1 semester, a cohort of 2nd semester. And interestingly, it seems to correlate with the level of engagement that students reported. So another almost 78% of students told us that they were either very or extremely engaged in these courses. So this was our long programming. This was programming that if you came in a cohort in the fall, what you did was, and we'll talk about that in a second, you took some AQ programming, then you redesigned. What was interesting about this programming is in the old version of CRT, it was really high touch and reaching very few faculty, and therefore fewer associated courses, and by extension, fewer students. So for the same amount of money, we were able to accommodate 39 faculty and 63 courses, which gave us that N of 3,027. Beverly's going to describe what we did.
Yes, so what did we do to get all these great results, right? And so we really designed a 2-semester, what we would call a much more high-touch faculty development program. And we leveraged the AQ, Association of College and University Educators, online professional development modules. The 5 that we selected are listed on the slide here. So they walk through a fully online module, one of these every 2 weeks. We also kind of overlaid our own kind of high touch checking in. We had folks film themselves during a portion of one of the modules and sit with the facilitator to watch that. And then as they went through, a lot of check-ins, we had a face-to-face meeting. And so they were doing these modules and then also kind of meeting and working with us in our center. And then I'll talk about part 2 in a second. But these were the kinds of courses we worked with. A lot of just sort of GE or major requirements. We had a range. We had some, other courses, but it was a way to get a lot of faculty in. The Poli-Sci 1000 course, we actually had a team of instructors work one semester, and that really helped kind of boost their efforts together as a team. I believe there were 5 faculty or so working, 7 working on that course. And so the things they did were they watched these modules. The part that's a little different from just normal kind of online modules is they actually had to practice one of the techniques addressed in the module back in the classroom that second week of that module, and then reflect on that process and post it so that all the other cohort members could read and so the facilitators could read. So it wasn't just sort of learning, right, how to give an effective lecture. It was actually trying something in that classroom, posting about it, talking about challenges, again, filming themselves and debriefing once through this process. And then we worked with them the second semester. We gave them a template for their course in Moodle. That kind of embedded a lot of these best practices. For example, we encourage them to do 1-minute papers or Muddiest Point prompts. And so the Moodle template would have an example, minute paper forum or a minute paper assignment that they could end up utilizing when they redesign their course. And so it really just helped them kind of organize their Moodle course shell. It helped them embed some of those teaching best practices that they learned in that first semester. And that was really the result of that, redesigned course the second semester. And so here's an example of what the LMS template looked like. And in that template storage area, there were, example language for in-class activities, for a critical incident questionnaire, Muddiest Point, minute paper, those kinds of things. Exam wrappers were another thing that we embedded in the template. So they can pick and choose the kinds of things that they tried the previous semester that they had success with, or that their cohort members mentioned they tried and had success with, and decided what they wanted to implement in the second semester. Here's a couple of examples of actual faculty courses, what they look like. You can see that there's also a knowledge survey that we work with faculty, a pre and post knowledge survey of what their students knew coming into the class and at the end. And so they had leeway in kind of just organizing their content online, having that online presence, and utilizing the tools in that template. And so we kind of stayed with them, tracked with them, worked with them. That second semester, that was where we did the mid-course evaluation for their students. And we asked them to also write a final program reflection just to kind of see how things went. And so really, again, you can see that this 2-semester program was intensive, but it was really for them to go at their pace for the online modules and them to choose what they wanted to do, and really helped them in motivating them to do whatever they'd like to do for that course.
I think this goes back to our issue of iteration. We just didn't believe that a single-shot workshop that were episodic was going to move the needle. We felt that we would have much more committed faculty. Our faculty are very committed anyway, but I think the changes that they were hoping for, we sort of had to be all in. And that was, I think, it's a lot of emotional labor to redesign a course. It's a lot of emotional labor to do faculty development. You're dealing with expert learners, people that are, very good at what they do, very thoughtful about what they do. I think that we can't underestimate the role that reflection played in this process. We were actually looking, as Emily said in the very beginning of the session, at goal setting, which is a precondition for expert learning, self-evaluation, the ability to monitor one's own behavior, the ability to think about who you are, think about your teaching identity, think about what you're doing in the classroom with your students. So what we did following this year of 2 cohorts, 39 faculty, a bunch of associated courses, and a lot of students, is we collected all of these faculty reflections. I put one up. I will not read it to you. I know you know how to do that. I can't stand when people read email PowerPoints for me, so I'll let you just take a look at this. This is very typical of the type of reflection that faculty came out with following practicing teaching techniques in the classroom, thinking about what they were doing, coming back, posting with their respective cohorts and communities. So AQ very generously hooked us up with Debbie Hecht, who runs the center. She's a research scientist at the Center for Advanced Study, actually Study and Education at City University in New York. And what we did is we took all these, I think it was about 125 reflections per cohort, and she aggregated the data and then qualitatively coded them, and went looking for themes. And, just those 150 or so, 127 references reflections produced a whole ton of references that she was able to sort into 5 major themes, because we were really trying to get at the there for faculty, and it came up with the following 5. The first was the faculty thinking about the instructional techniques they were using. The second is their students' responses to instruction as reported by faculty in the reflections. The third was the description of the classroom environment, the challenges they encountered, and then the goals and plans they were setting for themselves. And very interestingly, faculty had these sort of epiphanies, one of which was that regular communication and two-way feedback was really critical. And I think it's easy to look at these ahas and say, well, no kidding. But I think there's a huge difference in knowing something intellectually and really being able to inculcate something and absorb something emotionally. And I think that's what happened. So by the time a faculty was done with our program, our 2-semester program, we started seeing actual changes to practice. More instruction under instructor challenges. We saw time management becomes its real issue. Lack of preparation had consequences. Course learning objectives actually really mattered. They weren't just some accreditor's device, meant to hound, the way that we planned and taught our courses. So one thing I want to turn over to Jillian is the next reflection question. We won't have a long time for this, but I just would like to hear from the tables about what you all think motivates your faculty to teach well.
Yeah, so why don't we do this one quickly as a whole group? And I don't know if this one's so difficult to answer. Anybody have an immediate reaction to this? And I'm going to ask you, there's a microphone right there, if you could use that. And it would be lovely if someone could just hop right up and respond to this. What do you think motivates at this point? Anything new that you've heard here in this presentation? What's worked at CSU LA? And okay. I'll repeat this. Yeah. So seeing some results, some actual difference in the quality of the student's experience or in what they're reporting as going on. And the comment by the one faculty member who said she was shocked by the change is, that's a nice thing. I like when faculty can be shocked still. Yeah, that's a good quality. Thank you, Rob. Okay, here we go.
Question for you. What does it mean to teach well? Does that mean that they're trying? I mean, yeah, so that's my...
Yeah, it's going to make us define the terms here. What does it mean to teach well? Nice. Do you want to answer that, Catherine?
There's a very interesting article, very apropos of this session, that appeared in Inside Higher Ed on, I think it was last Thursday or Friday, and it's featuring a brand new study by fellow named Robert Stupniski, Stupnisky, and it appears in Contemporary Educational Psychology about faculty members' motivation for teaching and best practices. So I think the point is here, what is the motivation that gets, what are possible motivators that faculty, what and how they're doing in the classroom?
Okay, we missed
We're
a few
talking
of
about,
those. Oh, wait. Yeah, hold on, Rob. Hold on, Emily, and it looked like Emily was poised to respond, but hold on a second. Are we okay, Rob? Emily or Catherine or Beverly, respond now. Can you guys hear us?
can you hear us?
Yeah, okay, now we can. Yeah. We lost a little bit of your last comment there, Catherine.
Oh, so sorry. So go ahead and Google.
Rats.
Inside Higher Ed has a story on a new study about faculty motivation to teach. And, I think that what we're really looking for here is no matter what the secondary clause is, what we're interested in is what motivates faculty. What motivates them to inculcate best practices? What motivates faculty to want to return to and improve teaching? What motivates continuous practice, modest risk-taking? You can sort of operationalize that as you like.
I mean, I guess I would argue teaching well would be to engage your students, right, and to have them be successful in your course. Obviously, the article will talk about what is quote-unquote teaching best practice, who determines that, but I think just having your students succeed in your course and have them engaged in the learning is what hopefully we all agree would be to teach well.
So the article I was citing is from Contemporary Educational Psychology. The author is Stupnisky, Stupnisky, Robert H. The title of the article is Faculty Members' Motivation for Teaching and Best Practices, Testing a Model Based on Self-Determination Theory Across Institution Types.
And I'll just add to what Catherine and then Beverly have added the question from the audience, which is a really important one. What does it mean to teach well? Certainly from my perspective in a system office of the California State University in the midst of an ambitious initiative, teaching well is teaching that contributes toward these goals. So that means that students learn well in each course so that they are motivated to return the next semester and can then apply what they learned in one course in the next course and continue to be successful. So deep learning. And then I would add to that, on the initial slide I showed with our goals, I didn't enunciate, but perhaps you saw that we also aim to reduce, eliminate equity gaps. So that means also an awareness on the part of the faculty member of how students in the course individually and as a whole are doing to ensure that there aren't gaps in achievement of outcomes that need to be addressed.
Yeah, nice. All right, why don't we head back to your next slide, since I think it will be a nice reveal here in terms of incentives and motivation.
So if I were to return back to this slide, which I showed everyone earlier, I'm just curious from the audience, which of these you think matter the most? And if you were to order these, what order might you give them? I'll just take a couple of shout outs from the audience.
Yeah,
What would come
what's
first?
number
What
one?
would come second? Last.
Okay, we have some sort of consensus here, at least a very loud voice for high touch.
Yeah, yes, we agree.
Mm-hmm.
What would come next?
What's next? Opportunities? Yeah, opportunities to practice and reflect. How are they
This is
doing?
the dream crowd.
Yeah, I thought they looked pretty sharp.
It's funny, if you read that Inside Higher Ed article, I think the phrase that struck me is that neither money nor, I'm trying to remember what the second thing was, maybe Emily remember, but they are not really motivators. They're not intrinsic motivators. It helps, the money also always helps, but we saw results that actually surpassed our original results in 2013 when we were giving faculty full course releases. Fewer faculty full course releases with results that were not as impressive as providing a high-touch experience that was iterative with opportunities to practice and reflect and make friends, and food matters. So I just want to sort of wrap it up and talk about some of the hallmarks of our programming based on this sort of trial and error in assembling our programming, designing our programming. We learned a lot about ourselves as developers. We learned that reflection really matters, whether you're the faculty you're trying to help or whether it's yourself. The importance of prior knowledge. Faculty come with a lot of experience, and that needs to be affirmed. Their attitudes and beliefs really matter, and so do yours. The value of time. In other words, there's ordinal time, but you could have 4 workshops in a week, or you could spread those workshops out over 4 weeks. We believe the latter is actually more impactful. Introducing dissonance. There's always going to be some dislocation that happens when people learn new things. How do you create the conditions for those through expert faculty design when you're dealing with experts? So one thing we know from the literature on self-regulation, Paul Pintrick and Barry Zimmerman and those good people, is that anybody who's learning about something new, whether it's a new technology, whether it's about inclusive practice or diversity, they need to practice, and they're going to make mistakes, and that actually is learning. Those are the conditions that we think about for ourselves as faculty developers, for our faculty as faculty learners, and for their students, the ultimate learner. So when we think about now programming and faculty development, I really believe that good professional development, educational development, faculty development, that PD, however you contextualize that, is iterative, and that you need to have them practice. Practice and reflect. Signature activities, actually, faculty may think that, that the presenting need seems to be about course structure, but almost always it comes down to motivation. The faculty's motivation, the student's motivation, and those non-cognitive factors that actually, I think, underpin all of learning. That means intrinsic motivation matters, and people learn from their peers, faculty learn from their peers, so participating in community is itself a form of learning.
And then just to touch on, ideas of scale, right? This programming, we were able to actually reach much more faculty for about the same money of, instead of giving full course release. And so, walking faculty through things, and if you can sort of leverage other programming, right, to help scale your own center's programming, there's no way we could have addressed all of these workshops and all of these topics without leveraging an online professional development module. So you might want to think about how you can leverage other things. And then we always feel like, we can do things in our center that we do well, and for all these other kinds of things we either don't have time to develop or don't have time to hold all that programming, we can always leverage other programming. And think about asynchronicity, right? If we have a lot of contingent faculty working in our, going through our training, how can we allow them to do that without having to come into the center? And then again, just sort of walking with them, checking in, asking how things are going, having them build community and share with each other really helps them through this process of learning.
And I have to add to that we, and this is sort of our novice learning, right, as faculty developers, is initially we would do all this wonderful programming and then sort of leave off. And suddenly I started thinking, well, wait, shouldn't we be checking in with them like a year later, 6 months later, see what works, see what they're still doing? I think that is tedious, and it's so important. So that's really also the work of faculty development. It's, if you will, akin to a house. You really, we tend to think of the programming as the wallpaper, but that's just part of faculty development. You need plumbing, you need electrical, you need a foundation, you need all that stuff. And that stuff is invisible and something that faculty shouldn't see, but that developers really need to be mindful of. I don't know how easy this is for you to see. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I mean, so this is just sort of, again, another view of really registrations of all of our programming across, a timeline. And so what's interesting is we started piloting with this ACRU program in the fall of 2015, and that's about where you see that first initial kind of spike in the middle of your screen, is that we realized, too, having this sort of other professional development helps sort of inform and increase not only our center's name and our services, but increase, really participation by other faculty members. So there's always a sort of multi-layered effect, right? Leveraging other programming, adding it to your own, having other programming where they then pique their interest and want to keep coming back. And we never, when we started, I think would have thought that, now we'd spike to this huge spike in the last, couple months. So here's just, again, a snapshot of all of our workshop registrations. We track all of this using Eventbrite, so folks need to RSVP for our programming. I think we've been blown away. Our staff looked at the total seat time of programming we've offered, and we're sort of blown away that that's, what we've been doing. And so it's helped a lot in scaling in other ways and other types of programming that we can offer.
So that faculty trained number in the middle, 926, that's about 49% of our faculty, and that has remained stable for the last year and a half or so. I'm happy with that number. It's really important to us that when we offer faculty development, it is for all faculty. If we want to move the graduation rates, we have to be reaching out to our faculty with contingent appointments. Emily, I'm going to give it back to you.
Thank you, Kat and Beverly. So to wrap it up here, if you remember in the beginning, I showed you the slide with the system-wide graduation initiative 2025 targets that were announced in the fall of 2016. And what Catherine and Beverly have just shared is the way that they were thinking about scale in advance of that. And I see that as part of a movement away from, whereas sometimes faculty developers have almost a field of dreams approach, right? If we build it, they will come. And we've relied very heavily, I think, as a field on faculty to opt in and to come. And what Kat and Beverly were doing is beginning to think more in a more targeted way. Our course redesign with technology program from the system office was asking campuses to think about what we called bottleneck and what I think at this conference we call gateway courses. And now, as of the August of 2017, system-wide, we have another lever for scaling change and professional development. As the New York Times headline announced, this seismic change, which is that our Chancellor announced last August that our system is eliminating placement exams. That's actually kind of extreme language. We're moving toward multiple measures for placement into general education, mathematics, and quantitative reasoning, as well as written communication courses, and placing all students in college level courses. So now we have this opportunity to reach all of the faculty who teach those entry level mathematics, quantitative reasoning, and written communication courses. And we have this at least one model for how to do that in the work that the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Los Angeles was doing. So I know we're coming really right up against the end of our presentation time here, but we have one more reflection question that we wanted to close with, which is how can we scale? Have you think about how you can scale professional development at your institution and how you can reach more students by reaching more faculty. So we'd love to hear, and Jillian will let you facilitate this, but we'd love to hear if people have other things they're already doing or other ideas.
Yeah, I'd like to think about this as a call to action as much as a reflection. So if anyone has an idea, anybody want to give a testimonial here of how you're going to actually, what you're thinking about? Any minds shift today or some new ideas? that reinforce some of the things you are already doing? Yes, okay, Ethan's there. All right, let's get at least one good.
So I work very closely with our Center for E-Learning. We use Canvas, and from this presentation, I'm going to work more closely with them. I like that idea of having a template. So we could have a Canvas template that would have some of these practices, and I think they would be willing to create that, and we could do it. Well, we could pilot that, so I'm inspired.
Great shift. Yeah, very practical shift. Anybody else have one? Oh, good. Thanks, Gwen.
We are working to revise our set of requirements and tools for evaluating teaching effectiveness, and we're also working to develop a more coordinated, integrated approach like what was described, or proposing that. And we're hoping to tie those together so that there's real alignment between the professional development that we offer and the way that faculty will be asked to document their teaching effort. And it was really helpful to see what you all did at Cal State with that second semester, because we have thought a lot about an approach paralleling the way that AQ modules work. But what I hadn't thought about until today was this idea that we could be tying some of those approaches, which in AQ often are more, I think, focused on the instructional level. We could be tying that to the course redesign in the way that you did with your learning management system. So that was really helpful.
Nice. Yeah, ways to wrap all that together. Great. Well, Kat, I want to make sure we're observing the time constraints here. So any last words that you want to offer the group?
Delighted you joined us today. Thank you so much. Here's our email, cedal@calstatela.edu. We're always happy to share materials. Heartened to hear what a wonderful audience, and just listening to what you're doing with experiments and.
Oh. All right. Oh, she was complimenting us heavily. I can tell. Yeah. All right, I'm going to thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank Catherine and Emily and Beverly for participating today. We're really pleased that they were able to make their good work possible at this meeting, even though they could not personally be here. The travel issues from California to Texas are problematic, but we're grateful that you were able to share your work with us today. Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for participating in this session. Thank you. Good luck.